for tuning in to part 4 of 4-stroke versus 2-stroke for off-road/enduro riding. We've covered a lot already. If you've missed the first 3 episodes, you should probably go back and check some of those out. If you don't care about jumping in the middle of a story, then by all means, stick with us. Here's part 4. Another myth we wanted to sort of dispel a little bit about 2-strokes is that they don't have any power down low. Now, I think this myth comes from the small bore bikes, because honestly, a 50 2-stroke and a 65 2-stroke, they don't have any power down low. And even a 125 2-stroke, there's not a lot of power down low. But once you get into the big bore 2-strokes, and when I say big bore, I'm talking about 250 or 300, they do make a lot of power down low. And that's because every time the piston comes to the top of the cylinder, it fires it back down, which becomes an advantage. I'm not saying that it's, 4 strokes. Again, not saying 4 strokes suck at technical riding or they always stall easily, but the 2-stroke tends to stall a little bit less easily, at least these modern big bore 2-strokes, than a 4-stroke, because the compression isn't quite so high and it fires every time it comes to the top, right?
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is, there's gearing and there's the flywheel weight. Those have a huge, effect on that down low grunt, or without killing the bike for that matter. And so
it comes down to this. Everybody's got to find a bike that suits your needs. And, sometimes you're going to have to make some compromises. But you find a bike that suits what you want to do most of the time, and that's going to be a good bet. It could be a 4-stroke, it could be a 2-stroke. It just kind of depends on what your primary needs are, what your riding style is, and what you're comfortable with.
And that's why, we kind of favor KTM and some of these bikes. It's not necessarily because we feel like they're superior to everyone else. It's just because they make a specific bike for how we ride. It's tough to take like a CRF 450 or something like that, or KX, or RM or a YZ or anything like that, and basically tune them into an off-road bike, because they don't have that flywheel weight. They don't have that right gearing, the right sprocket scenario, and so forth. And so with the 4-stroke too, it just seems like when you're on the 4-stroke and you're riding, you tend to have to use that clutch a little bit more. But then when you start to get to that, it wants to just kill on you at a quicker rate, where the 2-stroke wants to seem just to pull a little bit longer through that. And the clutch work helps a little bit more. It's because of the whole idea of that, there's more mass, there's more weight, it's not firing every time. And so we tend to feel like, for us, riding on a single track rough stuff, the 2-stroke seems to be a little bit easier for us to not kill.
A little bit easier, yeah. And that isn't to say that it's better. It's just for the riding that we do, the 2-stroke tends to be a little bit easier to not stall the bike. Let's talk about clutch control for just a minute. Now, typically when I ride, I've got one finger on the brake and one finger on the clutch, and I'm modulating the clutch just a little bit if I need to get over certain obstacles or I need a little boost in power. Some of the time, though, I like to just stay off the clutch, and the 2-stroke allows me to do that because it will just power through. Let's talk about that for just a second in relationship to one of the other videos I did recently about a Razorback trail where I rode 2 bikes back to back and basically did no clutch modulation at all in order to prove a point. Going along with that stalling the bike, though, a lot of you guys saw the Razorback trail video that I did on the 4-stroke where I killed it multiple times. Well, the point of that video where I'm pitting the 350 4-stroke against the 300 2-stroke was not to show awesome clutch control. It was just to contrast the differences between the two. Now, obviously, when I got more adept at riding that bike, I started to use the clutch a lot more, and it got a lot better, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we went up some pretty gnarly crap, and even though the 350 XCF was not designed to do that stuff, it's made to get out and boogie in the desert, it still did really well with just a little bit of clutch modulation. But one of the things I learned really prominently in doing that is I found out why guys are putting recluse clutches on those 4-strokes, because wow, if you put a recluse, and if it's adjusted properly on one of those 4-strokes, then that becomes a pretty formidable package, because you can't stall the bike anymore. So what are your thoughts on that? If you think a recluse is necessary on a 2-stroke, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and just like Kyle said, a little disclaimer, we understood that the W is not a fair comparison to XC, especially a 300 versus the 350, but we get a lot of people asking us about that, and so we just kind of wanted to show that, you know, the W shines in that really hard, gnarly stuff, where the XC maybe not so much. But yeah, so, and the other thing is we've noticed is a lot of you guys have mentioned that the Recluse is kind of the way to go. We've heard mixed reviews. Some guys out on the trail have, you know, one guy told us that he had it in one of his Hondas. He had a 450, and he said he's just been fighting it the whole time, and then
getting it set
up right. And maybe it's just he hasn't done it right. I don't know. But then we've heard other guys where they just say it is.
They rave.
You should not ride your 450 without it if you're into the, you know, hard enduro type stuff, into the trail, you know, the extreme trail riding kind of thing, because it takes what we were talking about a little bit about how the 450s and the bigger four strokes want to just kind of clank and stop on you. It doesn't, because it's basically a semi-automatic transmission.
Yeah, I felt like, you know, if I put a Recluse on that 4-stroke, it would be a really, really great off-road bike. It would be a perfect one to be able to go out in the desert and hit the whoops really hard, and then it would also do super well in the mountains, because I would never stall it. A Recluse clutch is not the only thing you could do to your 4-stroke to make it run a little bit more like a 2-stroke and give it a little bit more of an advantage out there in the single track trails. I mean, you could put a 52-tooth sprocket or just gear your bike down just slightly. You can adjust your idle up. You can put a flywheel weight, like maybe a 7-ounce or something like that, a 7-ounce flywheel weight on your bike. You could adjust your throttle body and get, you know, there's a lot of different things you can do to make them more tractor pull and make them actually pull through. And so there's a few things that you can do that could make your 4-stroke really, really shine out there on the single track. The one downer about that bike is that at least the 350 XCF, no backup kickstarter. So if you have problems with your electric start,
for example,
if you have problems with your battery.
You bought a 14, right? And
yeah.
So how long did it probably sit?
Yeah, the 14 had sat in a showroom for a long time, and I bought it straight from the showroom. The battery was pretty much toast. I was trickle charging it and things, but it got to the point where it wouldn't start out on the trail, and we were able to bump start it. But if you put a Recluse in your 4-stroke so that you can have the ultimate off-road machine, you won't be able to bump start the bike anymore. You'll have to tear the clutch. You'll have to tear your clutch face off and do some rigging to be able to bump start your Recluse 4-stroke now.
Yeah, and some of you guys won't have that problem because you know, for example, like the Hondas and Yamahas and Kawis and Suzukis, they, you know, especially their you know, both their X versions or their WR versions
come with
a kick and electric start, which we were kind of really disappointed that KTM did not do that on their XC models, because we feel like that is a must-have, especially if you're doing Recluse and so forth. So, yeah.
Well, that puts part 4 in the books. So if you like what we're doing here, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and come back for more. We've got part 5 coming up pretty soon. And we've got a ton of other videos, how-tos and reviews and trail rides that you might be interested. So check all that stuff out, and we'll catch you next time.